The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Now a man was ill, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who had anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and dried his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was ill. So the sisters sent word to him, saying, "Master, the one you love is ill." When Jesus heard this, he said, "This illness is not to end in death, but is for the glory of God. The Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just trying to stone you, and you want to go back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If one walks during the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks at night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him." He said this and then told them, "Our friend Lazarus is asleep, but I am going to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Master, if he is asleep, he will be saved." Jesus was talking about his death, while they thought that he meant ordinary sleep. So then Jesus said to them clearly, "Lazarus has died, and I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe. Let us go to him." So Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go to die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, only about 2 miles away. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. Martha heard that Jesus was coming. She went to meet him, but Mary sat at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise." Martha said to him, "I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world." When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary secretly, saying, "The teacher is here and is asking for you." As soon as she heard this, she rose quickly and went to him. For Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still where Martha had met him. So when the Jews who were with her in the house, comforting her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out, they followed her, presuming that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come with her weeping, he became perturbed and deeply troubled and said, "Where have you laid him?" He said to him, "Sir, come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have done something so that this man would not have died?" So Jesus, perturbed again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay across it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the dead man's sister, said to him, "Lord, by now there will be a stench. He has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd here I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. So Jesus said to them, "Untie him and let him go." Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what he had done began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord. Lazarus, Lazarus, come out. Come out. If we had been in that crowd, I'm sure we could have heard a pin drop. Complete silence. People were intrigued by what was Jesus going to do. He had the stone rolled back from the tomb in which Lazarus had been placed 4 days earlier. Now he's calling to him. That's so weird. Lazarus, come out. As we heard in the gospel, Jesus had been beyond the Jordan. He had left there because the people were trying to stone him. But he heard that his friend Lazarus was ill, and so he waited a few days and then came back to Bethany, which is just over the Mount of Olives, about 2 miles from Jerusalem. But he hasn't entered the village yet when Martha goes to meet him. You can hear the frustration, maybe a little anger in Martha's voice. Lord, if you had been here, he would not have died. Why weren't you here? If you had been here, my brother would not have died. And so then Jesus has a conversation with her about the resurrection. He says, well, of course you know Lazarus will rise. And Martha says, well, I know he's going to rise, the resurrection of the dead at the end of time. But Jesus clarifies with her, saying that it's not just something that happens later, because I am the resurrection. I am the resurrection. The Greek says, ego eimi e anastasis. Anastasis, it means to stand up. I am the resurrection. I will give you life. This was a very important issue in the early church, the very early church, because as the contemporaries of Jesus get older, they start dying off. So they were concerned about that, saying, well, if Jesus is resurrection and the life, why are all these people dying? Why isn't he raising them like Lazarus? And so John the Evangelist put this account in the gospel to clarify the relationship that Jesus has with us as we journey through our lives. So Jesus approaches the tomb and calls out for Lazarus. Lazarus, come out. Well, inside that tomb, Lazarus opens his eyes. His face is covered with a cloth, so he can't see anything. That was the traditional way of burying people. You tied their hands and feet and covered their face, put them in the tomb and closed it up. Now Lazarus is laying in there. He can't see anything, but he can hear Jesus. Not only can he hear Jesus' voice, but Jesus is calling his name, Lazarus, and ordering him to come out. Well, if you've been in bed for a long time and then you have to get up, it takes a bit of an effort. You can imagine if you've been dead for 4 days on a slab and you have to move. I'm sure it hurt for Lazarus to sit up and stand up. He can't do much because his hands and his feet are tied together, so he's a bit inhibited. But he starts going towards the voice of Jesus, calling his name, Lazarus. And outside with the people, they suddenly hear something from the tomb. They're not supposed to hear anything from the tomb. He's dead. He's been in there for 4 days. But now there's a noise in the tomb. The sound of shuffling. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Lazarus has to take little tiny steps because his ankles are tied together. But he's heading towards the light. And eventually, he makes it. He comes to the entrance. People see him. It's Lazarus. He's alive. So Jesus says, take off the bands around his feet and his hands and take off that cloth from his face and let him go. Jesus had more for Lazarus to do. He wasn't done with him in this life. There's a reason why Jesus raises Lazarus. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One reason, it's a messianic sign. It's a sign of the Messiah coming. The prophets foretold there were various things that the person would do to show that they were the Messiah. One of the things they would do is raise the dead. Ezekiel talks about that in the first reading. Thus says the Lord God, O my people, I will open your graves and have you rise for them and bring you back to the land of Israel. That was a sign the Messiah was here, raising the dead. So that was pretty disturbing to the religious leadership. In fact, that sealed Jesus' fate. It was only going to be a matter of time until they had him killed. They couldn't have him go around doing messianic signs. That was crazy. Blasphemy. There's also maybe another job that Lazarus still had to do. Many Bible scholars now are saying that Lazarus reappears in the gospel later. This is chapter 11. But he's then called the beloved disciple. Even in this, John gives a clue. This is Lazarus, the one that Jesus loved. The beloved disciple will show up later in the gospel. The beloved disciple sitting next to Jesus at the Last Supper. The beloved disciple is with Mary on Calvary. The beloved disciple is with Peter when they enter the tomb on the morning of the resurrection. The beloved disciple will appear again up in Galilee when Jesus is there after the resurrection. The disciple whom Jesus loved. Speculation, but the scriptures seem to point that it's Lazarus, because there's no sign of the beloved disciple until after this event. So he's got more work to do. But one thing that clarified for the church, early church, is that death was not the end of life. Death was only a change. That as we pass through the door of death, as Lazarus did, although the Lord doesn't come and raise us from the dead in this world, the Lord is on the other side of the door of death, waiting for us to come through, waiting for us to come. We're supposed to die. That's what this is all about. We're only here for a time. And then we pass through the door of death into the arms of Jesus, and he takes us to the Father's house. So we can be sad about dying. We lose people, grieve about that. But it's why we're here. It's God's plan. Don't know why. But everyone here, without exceptions, going to die, just like Lazarus. What's different, though, is that you probably aren't going to be raised out of your tomb in this world like Lazarus was. Jesus says, I am the resurrection, and death will not overcome me, and will not overcome you, and I will meet you on the other side of that door and take you to the Father. And so it's reassuring to the early church to grapple with this mystery of why did the contemporaries of Jesus start dying? Why didn't what they saved from death? They didn't understand is that death is part of life, that we have to go through that door. But Jesus is a resurrection, and he'll come for us as we come through that door. This is the fifth Sunday of Lent. Next week's Holy Week. We have about a week and a half left of Lent. And it gives us time to meditate and to spend time reflecting upon our relationship to the Lord as the resurrection. that death is not something that will overwhelm us. We will all die. All the apostles died. All the saints died. But Jesus is there on the other side. That's the hope. And that's the belief that we have. And Jesus promised that he'd be there for us. And that's what he's telling Mary. Even though I wasn't here for Lazarus before he died, I'm here for him now. And Jesus will be here for us at the end of our lives as we pass through the door of death, going to the Father's house.